Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Kasia Madera.
Thank you. I'm Kasia Madera. Thank you for that beautiful announcement. I'm a journalist and broadcaster from the UK, and I've come from there this morning to be here with you, and I'm so thrilled that you've got such beautiful weather. It's been an absolute treat. So lovely to be here with you all. This session is titled Ready or Not, The Truth of EU Enlargement Readiness. And when we're talking about the truth, we've got a few fun things that we're going to talk about. Our guests are really up for being very honest about how they think, how they feel EU enlargement, how ready the European Union is. So please join me in welcoming my esteemed panel of guests. Christian Schmidt, the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. We are also all joined by Miroslav Lajčák, the Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina Dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues from the European Union. Thank you. And we're also thrilled to be joined by Thomas Bagger, the State Secretary for the Federal Foreign Office of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed panel, please welcome. Thank you so much for being very honest. We've got 50 minutes, and I do want to open it up to you guys as well, because I get to ask these gentlemen questions all the time, but I want you to be interactive, because let's face it, the sound of my own voice gets me a little bit tired. So please be interactive. The title, Truth, the Truth, EU Enlargement, Readiness. Christian, let's start with you. Are we going in the right direction? Is the EU ready to take in more countries? What is your assessment of where we are heading with EU enlargement?
Thank you. First of all, I think the issue is easy to answer and not easy. Easy, yes, we're on the right path for European integration, because European integration seems to be the only perspective for a good future and a wealthy and peaceful future in the Western Balkans. The second is, no, I think we have to add some more capabilities or ideas. Why? We have experienced that the enlargement of European Union is somehow following the method of Jean Monnet. Ever closer union, you go, everybody wants to join and goes to bed every day asking, what can I do up to tomorrow morning that I am fulfilling the requirements of acquis communautaire? This is not fully the case in the Western Balkans. So we have to think, either do we do it with an increasing of pressure, which pressure, political pressure, economic pressure, to bring all these requirements fulfilled, or do we have to think about intermediate steps, about possibilities to develop a special fitting structure for these countries? And if I say these countries, I would have to distinguish between the 6 countries, because each country has its own requirements. You could lose yourself by just going in such a detailed situation that nobody knows exactly, are they no member of European Union or in which degree or not. So we have to do it wisely in between. If I add for the country I'm representing here, this is that it's come with the Dayton peace agreement. This is not came from the blue sky. It was just to finish a dramatic, a cruel war. And I would not say that all what led to the war has been settled fully in the society and in politics. So there will be the need to not to merge, but to observe both approaches. This one of somehow keeping the path rightly by keeping functionality, and the European perspective, doing it with the European way.
So a lot to balance, and thank you for just walking us through that. A lot to balance, and thank you for your frankness as well. I think we're going to get some really honest answers here. Miroslav, we heard a little bit earlier, I don't know if any of you were at the session where Serbia's president was speaking. He was quite adamant that when it comes to timescale, Serbia will not be joining the EU in 2028. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's not impossible, because what is new is that the commitment that Western Balkans will join the European Union is 21 years old, but the emotion has disappeared. But now it's back after Russia's aggression against Ukraine. European Union started acting geopolitically and came to realize that we cannot leave the Balkans in limbo. So it is now clear that the enlargement is a geopolitical necessity. But it does not mean that we are ready for it, and it does not mean that they are ready for it, because they have been neglected for very long, and the commitment to reforms, unfortunately, almost disappeared. So now we have this political will. We could do nothing without it, but the will not do the job. So we need to get ready. They need to get ready. Now, speaking about years, it's always tricky. But the fact is that there are three countries who needed Lithuania, Latvia, Slovakia, who needed less than 3 years to complete the accession negotiation. Montenegro is already in this process for 12 years. Serbia is in this process for 10 years. And they are still far from being in the middle of the process. But if you are serious, if you start closing chapters, you can do it in 2.5 years, and with the 2 years for ratification. As I said, it's not unrealistic, but it's an ideal scenario. And we live in a real rather than an ideal world.
Well, he did mention that he was speaking the truth, and thank you again for your frankness as well. And I think that's what we want to hear today, just some real proper frank expectation management. I guess that's the way of putting it. Montenegro's leader earlier on, Thomas, said that Montenegro was experiencing a marathon with hurdles. I mean, that's just quite the understatement, though he was optimistic and positive. In contrast to Serbia's leader, I just wonder, from Germany's perspective, is it just too hard? Is the EU asking too much?
Well, I'm less of an expert on the Western Balkans than my two co-panelists, but if I may add a layer of complexity and look at the EU itself as the organization of 27 member states, I think you have to acknowledge that we all agree that enlargement is a geopolitical necessity, as Miroslav has said. Why? Well, that's the result of Putin's aggression, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, because there is no longer a common neighborhood. In a way, Putin has defined the limits of Europe for us. And Ukraine and Moldova are on our side of that divide, which means that is the geopolitical necessity. And then there's a second element which says, if we're serious about Ukraine, about Moldova, potentially about Georgia, then we need to be serious about the Western Balkans as well. Because of all the internal dynamics of the 27, it is basically inconceivable that you take in the 3 but not have no answer for the 6 who've been in this process for much longer, as he said. So, but you also cannot forget that as a union, we're coming out of a period actually of enlargement fatigue. If anyone remembers Jean-Claude Juncker's famous sort of enlargement pause for many years. And that has been changed by the war. But the war makes it a geopolitical necessity, enlargement, but it's not that it is already a real possibility. So the question is, how do we make it possible? And I think that's when you have to look at the internal dynamics of the union itself. And that is why the German position is we need to have internal reform and enlargement as 2 parallel processes, as the EU leaders have set out also in their I think in the December European Council last year, that these need to move in parallel. Because if we become a union of 30 plus members, and we already felt that we had dysfunctionalities in our cohesion, we want to make this a stronger union, not just a larger, bigger, more numerous union. So there will have to be things that change also inside the union. And I think that's the tricky part of it, of keeping these two in parallel and both progressing. And that is why it's indeed so hard to put a date on it.
Yeah.
It is, and firstly, thank you very much for all of you who have put questions to us already. And if you want to ask a question in the room, you can either use the Slido option, the hashtag GlobeSec 2024SC, or just raise your hand. We've got roving mics as well, so we'd love to hear your questions. But just on, while we're talking about that aspect, Thomas, I just want to bring up the question that we've got: what is hindering EU enlargement more, the political unwillingness of WB leaderships or the lack of openness on the EU side? To follow on from what you were saying, that openness, willingness, what is the crunch point here that it's not happening?
Well, I would say it is happening. I mean, we've come a long way. Who would have thought that we have a membership process with Ukraine, with Moldova? We have a new dynamic in the Western Balkans as well. But I think you can either, if you frame it the way the question is framed here, the political unwillingness of Western Balkan leaderships, the lack of openness on the EU side, then you're playing a blame game. Then you sort of, why doesn't it work? But the virtue is, we need to turn it into a virtuous cycle where sort of the new dynamic that has been created also by giving a perspective to Ukrainian society that this is actually not only about the war, it is also about the longer term perspective for society, for the economy, for people to return because they feel that they can become part of a viable, larger European Union with perspectives for themselves, that will be the incentive for reform. And the more reform there is, the more willingness and the more openness there will be on the European side as well. And turn this into a virtuous circle. And I think that that works with Moldova, that works with Ukraine. That is tricky in the Western Balkans because every single country that these two gentlemen know so much more about than I do have their own history and their own tradition and their own ambivalence about this.
Miroslav, yes, please. And thank you. The great question, because it is, to your point, quite leading as well. Love the fact that the person who asked it has remained anonymous. Love that. Yes, please.
Yeah, looking back at last 10 years, I would say both were partly true. There was a lack of political willingness on the side of the leadership from the region and also lack of openness on the European Union side. When my country was part of the EU accession process, the rules were very simple and very clear. And we knew that at the end, we get the membership. That's why we needed less than 3 years. Over the time, process became more complicated. And when you hear that the goalpost was moved or got blurred, it's all true. And then, obviously, from the perspective of a political leader, you are asked to undertake difficult reforms, but you are not sure that the benefit in the form of membership will come. So you are losing popularity in a way for something which is uncertain. If you know that it's you who is bringing the country in the European Union, is your generation of politicians, you are committed, and that's why we were both parties were sort of pretending. Yes, we want you in. Yes, we are doing everything we can. Neither of the two was really true. But this has changed. This has changed. With the political will is here, and yes, Ukraine opened the door, but now it's up to each and every candidate whether they will use this opportunity, because this door will not stay open forever. So this is different.
So is it? I mean, the dynamic obviously with the war has changed. But are you essentially then, Christian, these countries, the willingness or the reason why they want to join, is that changing? Does that just mean that?
Thank you. I would say it does not change, but is intensified. There's a realization that the spilling over of the conflict in the Ukraine could happen, should I say, any time, not in the sense of enlargement of the front of the battle of tanks, bed of the destabilization. And if you are following a minimax idea and you want to get a destabilization of parts of Europe, probably you go to Western Balkans because you have a minimum of investment and you can create a maximum of destabilization. Maybe there are some people, some countries, or one country who is interested. So I have to say, what do people want? And let me say, we have to look, we are looking regularly as politicians, diplomats, about the counterparts in the governments, parliaments in the countries. So you feel very soon that they have their internal discussion and sometimes the inability to come to say right or wrong, we now go together. This is not the common sense we see every day. So I think we should come to the question back about the reform in European Union. Should we, I'm posing the question, it's not on me to answer, should we adapt as well new lines for enlargement? You allow, our friend Anonymous has sent us some questions, and I would, in my former competence as Minister of Agriculture, would allow myself to take this one where he or she is asking whether EU member countries, especially the CE countries, ready to rethink the EU's cohesion and agricultural funds necessary for EU's enlargements by Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans. That's not my mandate now, but I'm coming back to my experience of recent years of EU agricultural policy reforms. And let me say, sometimes I'm a little astonished about the easy understanding to say, okay, give them 5 more years for transition period and things will happen. I suggest look on the potential of Ukrainian agricultural policy and the structure of they would meet and the European Union agricultural policy of today. I'm waiting to see somebody who explains to me how this will fit. But this is one of the core of European integration. So I think we have to see, is there the need for the 100% end status, or do we have to answer the request of security, of political integrity and integration that has been pronounced, by the way, yesterday by President von der Leyen very clearly, that she focuses on defense, on foreign policy. Is it needed to tell to the people in the Ukraine, you only will be with us if you have a full integration of your agricultural policy into European Union policy? My suspicion is this will not fit, because the 21 years Miroslav has referred to since Thessaloniki about the promise to bring Western Balkans into European Union, we cannot add 20 more. Why? Because security situation is as it is. This is the momentum we have, and this will not take 20 years to be fulfilled. And the second is just the internal situation among the Western Balkan states. All the responsible political people, they are having ideas, some are very creative, but if I allow me to say, I'm happy to see a lot of young people here. The young people in the Western Balkans are just waiting to give a contribution to European integration on their territory, if you may allow, or they are leaving. And the brain drain is dramatic. If we wait 10 more years, you will have, maybe you paint your picture yourself about Bosnia-Herzegovina. The figures are that we're coming up to between 60 and 80,000 loss of population every year. By realistic 2.8 million, take 10 more years and you see we have, friends, we have a problem. And we cannot say, wait up to chapter 35, everything is done, and then we go ahead. So I think these ideas, which we see now as well with the growth plan, and with this is fitting, this is good, but we have to realize that we have not a lot of time to do this.
So whose responsibility then is to speed that up, to stop the brain drain, to stop people leaving? Thomas, is it Brussels that needs to wake up and make it easier?
Well, that's really a very challenging question. I have, I grew up in West Germany. I come from a united Germany that, when I joined the German Foreign Service 30 plus years ago, this was sort of, this seemed to be, we wrote it into the briefing notes. We wrote about the irreversible process of European integration. And we felt that this was as much a normative as an analytical statement. This is what should happen and this is what would happen. We're a little smarter by now, or a little more cautious by the history of past decades. But I just say that because we had the same optimism about freedom of movement. And honestly, freedom of movement is a great thing individually. Offers every single citizen of the Union the perspective of building his own career, his own life in a place of his choosing within the Union. But collectively, for societies and nations, this has been quite an ambivalent process. And that's not only true for the Western Balkans, where it is true, Bosnia, Kosovo, other places, but it's also true for member states of the unions. I sort of carefully estimated, I think 1 out of 10 Croatians lives permanently in Germany and works there. And it's not clear that they would return to Croatia one day. So, and how do we deal with that? We have a tendency, of course, from where I sit, to say, well, if you would do this, if you would do that, if you would create more opportunities in your own economy, yes. But what if the center is sort of more attractive? So I just say that as honestly as I can, because I think it's a genuinely difficult debate. It is about issues of convergence and cohesion of the Union that are quite difficult. So I think simply to say, if these countries would become a member of the European Union, then the issue of brain drain would be solved, I think is too simple. So it may be part, it certainly creates opportunity also in these countries, creates a sense of a compelling idea of the future where I can stay in my own country and make my own luck, my own business. But I don't think that's enough. But I think more generally, also, again, from where I come from in Berlin, if there's one thing that I struggle with in the German political debate, it's this pervasive sense of pessimism that has gripped the country. And we talked about it earlier, because in Poland, where I served before, there's a very different mood. And it's even closer to the war. But there's a much stronger sense that we can shape destiny. We've changed our government in the last elections a year ago. We're off to a different and a better future. So this is really what this is about. I think are we able to generate a sense that membership in the Union, reform for the sake of membership, is actually an investment into a compelling idea of our own future? For the Ukrainians, most of them would, I think, unconditionally say yes to that. In the Western Balkans, I think it's a much more muted or ambivalent response. In Georgia, we all don't quite know, actually, what the response will be, but it's clear that the path of the current government of the last few months is not leading into that European future, but rather away from it. And I think that responsibility, to come back to your question, is ultimately one that rests with both sides. So you need to have a compelling path within the Union, something Ursula von der Leyen tried to sketch out yesterday in her speech. But you also need responsible leaders in these countries to actually be serious about the necessary changes to move in that direction and make the union stronger and not be an additional burden on the union as it is today?
Well, we're on this kind of like high-level thought, and we'll drill down a little bit in a moment because there are a few questions that I do want to put specifically to our colleagues here. But there's one question that asks you guys, but I'm not going to ask you guys. I'm going to ask you guys instead. Do you think EU citizens want EU enlargement? And it kind of follows on from what you were saying. Do you think EU citizens actually want to see EU enlargement? Who agrees with that? Raise your hands. Okay, I mean, that's not a quarter. A quarter of you think that's just that's pretty pessimistic. That's pretty pessimistic. Wow. Let's that's quite an eye opener actually. Let's drill down a little bit. I know, right? I mean, I can't talk. Just full disclosure. I'm from the UK, and yeah. Yes, sir. You've got your hand up.
I'm the Turkish ambassador here in Prague, and in a previous life, I served for 5 years as Turkey's chief negotiator to EU. So, a country that should be in the Guinness Book of Records for our deterrence to be a member of a club since 1958. No other country has been that patient. And we're still the most senior candidate country. But I've been following the debate about enlargement. That doesn't even come up. When Tomasz mentioned reform within EU, is that a multi-gear EU with different types of memberships for the newcomers and some of those who would like to switch, some of those current member countries to have the option to switch to this new membership type? Or is it more about like a Lisbon Treaty in terms of the decision-making process or empowering the parliament even more?
Shall I go for
yes,
that?
please, yeah. Thank you for your question and your patience.
As he knows, I served in Turkey by now, when the membership negotiation process was actually started in October 2005. And I've thought long and hard about exactly that question of why is it that there hasn't been more progress. But before I get into a debate on the EU and Turkey, I think there is no clear answer yet to your question. So what will be the new methodology that also Christian Schmidt sort of referred to? But we're moving into, so you've heard the Commission President yesterday, we're moving into a new institutional cycle by the end of this year. And the Commission has announced that it will present papers, I think by early 2025, so pretty early in its new term, on what it will actually take, what we need to focus on. And quite clearly, there's an issue of policies. Agricultural policies have already been mentioned, but other policies as well. There's a huge issue about the budget. And the next budgetary cycle, as the EU negotiates it, will run from 2028 to 2034. But this negotiation process for the cycle that starts in 2028 will start with the draft proposal that comes out next summer 2025. And then this will no longer be an abstract debate. It will be a very tough negotiation process. And if you think about it and you have a little experience of how these trillion dollar 7-year budget cycles are negotiated and how hard it is to come to an agreement, that's why they only do it every 7 years. And then you add to it that for the next cycle, we will always have in the back of our minds that this needs to be adapted or at least adaptable to a union of 30 plus members that includes Ukraine, a country of 30 plus, if not 40 million people, plus the Western Balkans, plus Moldova. That's quite a challenge. Or Turkey, even a bigger chunk, if you want to add that. And so I don't want to escape into ever new levels of complexity. I'm just saying that we need to get down to the hard questions of where do we believe policies need to be adjusted? Because one thing is clear, and I will not bore you with the details of the German budgetary debate, but one thing is clear from that, for me at least, that the next enlargement round, and certainly if it includes Ukraine, cannot be simply an extension of what we have. Sort of everyone who's in puts a little more money on the table, or the Poles and others give up a little of the subsidies from Brussels so that it can go to Kiev. That's not how it's going to work. There's not enough there to be spread around for the next round. So we will have to address that. And then you get also to the institutional questions. But since we Germans usually focus on the institutional questions, I didn't want to start with that. But there is a group of friends on qualified majority voting that we've initiated because we do believe that if we want to be a geopolitical and a strong union, we cannot be held up by a single obstructive member state, as we've experienced far too often in the last 2.5 years.
Thank you, and thank you for sparing us the details of the German budgetary discussions, but we appreciate that. But let's drill down a little bit, though, because you touched upon their processes, and Miroslav, we've got one question that I want to just focus in on for you. Do you see a breakthrough in the Belgrade-Pristina Dialogue? What kind of outcome solution do you believe we'll get?
If I may, I would still add what I see on the big issue from my perspective.
Of course you may, of course.
First, about the support. There is a poll conducted by Eurobarometer last year, which delivered quite positive results. Says 53% of the citizens of the European Union are in favor of enlargement, and 24 out of 27 countries produce this positive majority nationally. But I think this is the geopolitical angle. This is one you think, is it right? Yes, but the moment you confront the real politics with it, and you are asking, are we going to be stronger? Are our policy making going to be easier? Are we not importing countries which will not share our values? For many member states, this means switching from net recipient into net contributor. And these are the whole new set of really existing issues which will need to be addressed. And one can only expect that this enthusiasm will go down. I'm a policy practitioner, so I deal with issues, and I know how easy it is for the third countries to prevent the European Union from being a factor. It takes only one member state. You convince one member state not to join consensus, and European Union policy does not exist. And many are doing that. So you have to invest enormous amount of effort to keep the 27 together, but sometimes it's a bigger game which has nothing to do with the issue at all. So if European Union, and I fully agree with that, if European Union aspires to be a global player, which is our dream, we need to address these issues. Qualified majority vote, for example. Belgrade-Pristina is an issue that obviously without resolving this issue, we can forget about the integration of the Western Balkans, not only Kosovo and Serbia, but this is currently hindering the regional cooperation. Regional cooperation has been stalled because of this problem. Do I see a breakthrough? Look, I think we managed to do the best possible thing, which is the agreement on the path to normalization, which was adopted last year in Ohrid, but has never really been implemented, or even worse, the implementation has not started yet. I would like to quote President Macron, who said 2 days ago in Belgrade, the road is paved, and the road is called the Ohrid Agreement. So, but what is missing is the political will, and also the two societies are not ready for this. So, and plus we will have parliamentary elections in Kosovo in February, so it would be naive to believe that you can expect breakthrough before the elections. But we have to make sure that we see a significant progress in the implementation right after the elections.
Thank you, thank you. We've got a question here and a question here, so if I can get our roving mics to this gentleman in the front. Thank you so much for that answer. Yes, sir.
I would like to share a certain frustration from my side together with you. Because I believe whenever it comes to this debate, everybody agrees that EU enlargement is necessary and that it's a must. But then we are talking about decades that this would happen and that we can realize it. And this reminds me when I was a young member of the management board of Mercedes-Benz. 30 years ago, we took a decision to build a factory in Turkey under the proviso that EU membership of Turkey will happen maybe by the latest in 2 or 3 years. Now we see where we stand. And I believe that industry needs predictability. And if it comes to the process that we see, that we have a lot of bottlenecks in Western Europe with a lot of problems, especially in Germany. And I see that there are so many young talents in those countries where we would like to do investments. I believe really that we are missing major opportunities when we are waiting too long, and that with this frustration in these countries will increase, and we are missing opportunities even more under the actual circumstances which are linked with Ukraine. I know that this is more big picture and nothing linked with detail, but I see as well that in most of the European countries, politicians are doing, please apologize, a lousy job, because they are not convincing the people about the advantages of the EU membership of such countries. And that this is a great opportunity for us. And I believe really, and I would like to tell you that I really believe that this process, when I see as well that it takes still 10 years or how many years to come to conclusions, I believe that we are losing a lot of time. And I am sure that we should finish this and have a much stronger vision about what to do, and a willingness to execute and not to talk about strategic tools. I know that it's extremely difficult, but I believe that we must be more impatient, and that we must be more courageous, and that politicians should be more convincing in telling the people about what the opportunities are, not what the problems are behind. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your frustrations. Thank you. Let's forward the microphone to this gentleman. Thank you, sir.
I share the same.
I think I'm gathering. Who else shares this frustration? Is everybody... yeah, it feels like it.
Nikola Dimitrov, former foreign minister for North Macedonia, who, to tell the Turkish ambassador, I think he knows probably, is the second longest candidate country. So we are a professional candidate country. We know everything there is to know of the waiting room. The number of tiles, the number of corners, 19 years. And the issue, our problem was not lack of reforms, far from being perfect, but in times we had political elites and a society was ready to bite, to move forward. This was prevented because of one single member state. It used to be Greece, then the torch was taken over by Bulgaria, and this was not about the Copenhagen criteria. It was first about our name, now it's about our language, our history, etc. So if EU wants to become a global player, it has to be able to make a change, at least locally, initially. And this region is, in the European geography, we are surrounded by member states. The leverage is immense. Membership is on offer. At least this is set. So my question is, in this sort of, and I applaud whoever coined the title for this panel and the way you moderate it, madam. So my question mostly to Thomas is, we have to find a way to make it more difficult for a single member state to play the role of a spoiler. I would love to be blocked on rule of law. This is the essence of the process. But don't block me on my language. It's not European, it's wrong. And we are in a race against time, we are losing our young populations. If we are serious about enlargement, we have to address this problem. Qualified majority voting is one way to go about it. If you want to block a country, if you have a legitimate concern, a legitimate issue, a European issue, you should be able to find allies in the room among the member states. If your issue is crazy, you will most likely be singled out. You're going to be alone. Let's make it difficult for the member states to block a single candidate country. Usually those are neighbors. Usually those are the member states who will benefit the most out of a successful European story. So, are we getting somewhere with the qualified majority voting debate?
It's something that actually I was just having a conversation on in the other room, in the Havel stage, with the president of Slovenia, and it's literally, I think you will, if you bring that up with the president of Slovenia, she will, you'll be knocking on an open door there, because it's something very similar to what you mentioned. Yeah. Thomas, I'm going to throw this back at you. Oh, yep, go on. Sorry.
Thank you. Just as there, your analysis or your not despair, but your expectation, I think, has to be answered. And as somebody who has, nearly 30 years ago, was co-author of the so-called Schäuble-Lammers paper, where we thought about core Europe, had to do with the United Kingdom in these times, and not with others, but referring that Valéry Giscard d'Estaing already had the idea of Europa de vitesse, and trying to find an answer on the question if the necessity for accordance in the European integration gets higher than the possibility or the political ability to do. How do we manage? Do we say you are singled out, or have we a step-by-step approach? I know very well that Turkey has made the experience with the wording of privileged partnership and could not be very happy about this idea. But if we see... It was not in the acquis. There was no example. No. It was, as you're absolutely right, but the political discussion coming to trying to find some way to have a reliable relation and integration without doing everything. May I add another problem? The misunderstanding I feel sometimes in the Western Balkans is that there are some people, not all, but some, are thinking it is sufficient to negotiate with Ursula von der Leyen and things would be done. This is wrong, with all respect to the importance of the European Commission. The decision about membership is a decision of the member states. So you have to go through 27 parliaments, or in France, a discussion about referendum, to convince that there is a majority favorizing European integration. I think I feel not a public relations diplomatic campaign already to say, look, friends, we are necessary. We have to go for it. We are bringing in advantages. So I think this needs as well, not only in European Union, but a rethinking in some countries in the Western Balkans, and Ukraine will and Moldova has quite another situation now, but I think this is one of the key issues we should take out. How can we go and do it? If you allow just to Northern Macedonia, yes, you have done a lot. You have changed your name. You have whatever you did, and now this is then the time when European Union comes and says, hey, what? The people in Northern Macedonia, we are doing everything, and now we are blocked again. This is as well that we need a way of practicability. I could imagine, remembering that as we negotiated, I had the honor to be part of the TTIP negotiations with the Americans and the Canadian how it's called, what do we have done? We have not put it as an international treaty to put it to every member state, but we just have taken the possibilities which one could do on the level of Brussels and Strasbourg. So this is just, we need creativity. We need a possibility to prove that there is a severe interest, a European interest, to bring the Western Balkans in, to bring Ukraine in, due to our security situation, not to the economic situation. With all respect to the Western Balkans, the economic situation in the Western Balkans, or the figures are not making a yes or no for European Union. But security and understanding of Europe as it is, I think it is very clear this is part of Europe, and we have to find a proper way to bring it in. Not to say you are second class, not to say we want to get you fully, but to knowing, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, we have somebody just only except if the CIA director is coming, he's a little bit not that loud, saying segregation. I have to say, friend, no way for segregation, but this is not the job of European Union. This is the job of Dayton and of those with restrictive measures they can take in the national community. But then, having set aside this, it is a need to get convincing to say, what can you bring into the negotiations and what not, and let us openly discuss how far the possibility goes for which level of first step integration, and then maybe we have 10 more years time to come to the details and have a lot of functionaries and employees from Berlaymont and from the nation states just to work.
We haven't got 10 years. This is what everybody's saying. We haven't got 10 years, but thank you. Listen, there's one question that somebody has asked, again, anonymous, so and you'll know why once we ask it. Who will enter the EU earlier, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, or the Balkan countries? I want to twist it slightly, Miroslav, to you. How would you feel if Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia got into the EU ahead of you?
Well, the enlargement or accession process is meant to be a merit-based process. That means those who enter first are those who have done the best job. So that this must be absolutely clear that it is a fair competition. However, it takes time. As I said, the three countries that I mentioned, they made an absolute record, less than 3 years of negotiations. This cannot be repeated. So the process of negotiation will take longer. For sure. Ukraine Foreign Minister is saying that our negotiations on agriculture will certainly be the most difficult negotiating chapter in the history of the European Union, and rightly so. So therefore, let's not have illusions. This will be a very complex process, but the commitment is clear. One thing, but is obvious, Montenegro can join by 2028. No one can do it faster than them, because only Montenegro and Serbia are already in an advanced stage of accession negotiations, but Montenegro has everything in their hands, while Serbia has the problem with Kosovo to resolve before. So Montenegro is dreaming about becoming the 28th member in 2028, which will mean close all chapters by 2026, and that's realistic. For Ukraine and Moldova cannot close negotiations 2026 when they have not even started the negotiating process. Again, there are certain rules of this process. But what I want to see is really commitment, competition among the aspirants, and the European Union being ready to accommodate, of course, and to respond positively to everything that these countries have done in the reform process.
Thank you so much. We've got 30 seconds left, so I'm just going to ask you guys in the audience a question. Do you think the EU needs to speed up its enlargement process? Raise your hands if you think yes. Okay, well, a slightly different reaction to what I had earlier on. Apologies, we're going to finish the session now because we are running out of time. But thank you so much to my esteemed panel for joining me. And please do stay here because we've been talking about a readiness of the EU enlargement process. And we were talking about are they ready or not. Our next panel is going to be talking about the new actors in EU enlargement, the dynamics of it. So do stay with us for that next chapter. But for now, for my esteemed panelists and for you for your brilliant questions, a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.